Okay, my name is Louise Stonington, and as it says in there, I used to practice law. I did poverty law with legal services for a period of my life. I then retired so that I could work on peace and justice issues, nuclear disarmament and non-intervention in Central America. And then I went back to school and trained to be a middle school science teacher, which was great fun. And I studied climate, and after I retired from that, and doing occasional talks with other teachers about climate change, I blogged for 2 years on the solutions, because the Al Gore workshop on climate reality is like all about the horrible things that are happening, and what do we do about it was not really answered. And so I blogged about solutions, and then I found Citizens Climate Lobby. And I have been volunteering with Citizens Climate Lobby primarily since then. So that's who I am, and that's why I think I can give this talk. So I am going to talk for about what I have found for a half an hour, and then I'm going to open it up to questions and contributions. Okay? Okay. So, here we go. So, I call it dollars and cents. Okay. So, what do you say when people ask this question, we can't afford clean energy? What do you say to them? Right? We hear this all the time. There are conflicting explanations. The two views that seem to be in the New York Times and elsewhere now is that the Green New Deal would cost, I heard somebody in the administration say, well, we'll just round it off to add another 7 trillion and we'll make it an even 100 trillion. And that's what it's going to cost you to have a clean energy economy. So that's one point of view, and the other is from the book Drawdown, which if you look at the back, in the back there's the list of the costs and benefits of each of these solutions, and when they add them all up, investing in climate solutions, they say it would cost 27 trillion, but it will come back to us with a total benefit of 74 trillion, which is better than my bank is giving me, I'll tell you that. So, I always start off being a member of Citizen Climate Lobby with saying thank you. Appreciation, admiration, and respect is part of our mantra. And so appreciation, I love my hot shower. I love going for a drive. Don't you? Go for a vacation, a cruise. I love appliances. I mean, think of all the wonderful things that fossil fuel has provided us. We live like kings couldn't even imagine hundreds of years ago. And heaven, we have these wonderful things. So honestly, I can say thank you to anybody who has worked in the fossil fuel industry, because they have given us this huge gift. And the other part of the gift that they have given us is their own replacement. And that's what they're having a problem with. You know, Grandpa doesn't want to give up the keys to the car, but he's got to, because it's not working anymore. So, it's clear that we are living a wonderful life, but it is a fool's paradise, right? There are more carbon emissions from fossil fuels, and this is the 4th grade explanation of the science on, in one paragraph. You burn, you get carbon emissions, it makes more heat. What does more heat do? You get evaporation, right? Evaporation. And that makes drier lands, wildfires, and drought. More evaporation also makes the clouds heavier, so there's more rain, and there's more flooding, and more melting, and sea level rise. It makes the jet stream unstable, so that cold air from the Arctic comes down and freezes us all. And there's also this nasty thing of methane release from the Arctic.
Does that include then the permafrost melting?
Yeah, and you know what? I'm not going to. If you want a piece of paper to write down questions,
oh, okay.
Here's a piece of paper. Right? Write down your questions if you can, and then I'll answer at the end. And so the Paradise Fire has become almost a symbol of this horrible thing that's happening called climate change. But the irony is, most people get it. Most people want more clean energy. You know, the polls say that clean energy is really a popular thing. Clean energy is cool. They want it. So, in the United States and worldwide, the use of renewables is growing. It's not fast enough, though. It's not fast enough. And clean energy could replace most of our uses of energy. We've got power, solar plants, solar rooftop, electric trolleys, electric buses, high energy, efficient new buildings, net zero buildings in Seattle, and retrofits, which some studies say is the absolute cheapest way to really, one of the cheapest ways to really save is energy efficient retrofits. The problem is that although you'll get people saying optimistic that this is all going well and we're making a lot of progress, the problem is it's not. It's getting worse by the day because the amount of fossil fuels that are being burned is increasing still by the day. So worldwide emissions from fossil fuels hit a record high in 2018 and grew at the fastest rate since 2013. China is our top producer of clean energy, but China is also developing coal all over the world. Huge amounts of coal plants around the world. What the heck? What the heck? Wow. So how do we persuade investors to redirect money to clean renewables? Well, where is the money? Follow the money. Where is it? The way I see it, it's in banks. It's in bonds and stocks and market. It's governments, it's corporations, and it's consumers. If I missed one? Well, that would be bonds. That would be the market, shareholder. So that's where the money is. And the question is, how do you wrest that away and get it into clean, renewable, and efficiency? Okay, so banks. Let's start with banks. Banks are investing trillions of dollars in fossil fuel development. They gave 1.33 banks, just since the Paris Agreement, which was in, yeah, they have given, lent, contributed, bought 1.9 trillion is how much money has gone from banks to finance fossil fuels since that agreement. Okay, the biggest and richest bank, or the bank that's been doing the most, and it's way ahead, it's like double the next one, is JP Morgan. And so, and the next one after that, Wells, Citi, Bank of America. There's a report, Banking on Climate Change, which has this information on it if you want details on that, or if you're interested in working on one of these kinds of campaigns. So how do you get those organizations and sites that have all the money, how do you get them to put their money, get their money out of where it is, and put more into clean energy? Boycotts? Divestment campaigns. You hear about universities and colleges that are putting the money that they have in savings into not fossil fuels anymore. Shareholder actions, consumer choice, what we buy, where we put our money, and legislation. I see those as the ways that we can change things. Well, Sierra Club, I know, has boycott, divestment campaign against JP Morgan. They were marching all over in front of the banks over in Wenatchee and in Seattle, and I'm sure other places too, and saying, do something about this, Chase Bank. Don't keep putting money into developing new fossil fuels. So, this is Matt Arnold. I wish I could bring Matt Arnold here to talk to you. I bet he's the nicest person you've ever met. I bet he is. You know who he worked for? He worked for WRI. He worked for the World Resources Institute. He was their CEO. World Resources Industry is one of the most reputable think tanks that studies what is happening to the climate, that studies the natural resources of our world. He was their CEO, right? So what does he do now? He has gone to be Chase Bank's sustainability officer. Oh, I'm sure he has a credentials. And I'm sure he's not. Matt Arnold. There's an interview with him online. So I listened to this and looked at the wording. Okay. So what he says is, he says, we decided to start pulling back from coal to, quote, reduce our exposure. Not sure whether that exposure means to stranded assets or whether that exposure is to negative public opinion. But they're wanting to reduce exposure and they're pulling back from coal. He says, we're starting to install solar panels on a lot of our bank branches. And we put LED lights in. So, you know, they know that something's happening. And when he was asked by the interviewer, what's the potential for increasing Chase Bank's investment in clean energy and efficiency? What did he say? He was asked, well, could that be done? And his answer was, there's more money than you could ever need. And then he goes into an explanation that I didn't understand because I'm not a financial advisor, of exactly what the parameters are that would allow Chase Bank to put more money into clean energy in the developing world. And what it really boiled down to after I read it the second time was, we've got to make money on this. We can't take a lower percentage. We can't do that. So, and then of course he ended up with saying, we cannot do without fossil fuels, and we are, he admitted, a large banker to clean burning fossil fuels, which is a contradiction in terms. And if anybody wants to know more about natural gas, I'd be happy to talk about why natural gas is not a good alternative. It's not a bridge fuel. It's just as bad as the other carbon fuels for the climate. So this is what Matt Arnold, and what I hope is to be able to talk to him or one of the people that works with him. I really want to do that. And I'd love for somebody here to come with me. So if you're going to go and talk to someone who is doing this, you want to be aware that this is sort of a Ponzi scheme. This is a race. We want to burn as much of this stuff as we can, quick before they stop us. Really. And so the amount spent by banks on sustainability and clean energy is there, and they talk about it, but it's just totally a tiny fraction of what they're spending on fossil fuels. They're also advertising a whole lot. And there are other examples, but this one is about the $2 million spent on Facebook and Instagram ads just before the elections. Just before the elections, promoting the benefits of more fossil fuel. So if you go in and talk, and this is what Citizens Climate Lobby volunteers do. We take deep breaths, and we go and we talk to people who are decision makers. And we prepare, we do lots of research, and we decide on what we can say to them that would help them make the right decision. And some of it is just stories from the heart. And so talking about, these are the things, some of the ways that I express it to people who want to know what I feel and think. And I try to avoid, I believe that climate change is real. Instead, I use the phrase, I am convinced by the evidence. Because that's a little easier for people not to argue against. But you can give your opinion, that you think this is a moral issue, what you think is right and wrong. What most people want to hear, and what I think people came here is, well, can we really afford clean energy, right? We want to be able to say, this is an opportunity. If you've heard Governor Inslee talking, he did an interview on Fox News, and he pivoted. They kept asking him something that would have, for ordinary people, they would have sort of gotten lost in the detail of trying to answer. But what he did was, he sort of gave half an answer, and then he pivoted to say, this is a great opportunity for America to have a green energy economy. And that's the case we want to make. Can I help you? You're just looking. Come on in. The chair.
Sorry for interrupting.
So, no. We have solutions. So if you go to the bank, you can talk to them from the heart. You might want to keep in mind their revenue, because this is what Matt Arnold was talking about when he says there's plenty of money to invest. And so the investment in fossil fuel companies is substantial. And this was just 2018, their revenue. Some investors are actually leading the way. And there are certainly, behind this kind of decision, there are certainly citizens who are lobbying and working and helping. But the New York City Employees Retirement System comptroller is leading a group of institutional investors to take $1.8 trillion in assets that they are investing for people in their retirement, right? And take that and demand that the electric generation companies that are they're investing in commit to low carbon or zero carbon ways of generating electricity. And so he was quoted in the article about this saying that the climate crisis is an immediate threat, not only to our planet, but to pension systems and ultimately to our beneficiaries. This is a plan. This is not an action quite yet. I want a comment here. If I'm talking too fast, nod your head. Thank you. So, pulling on the levers of political will. Citizens Climate Lobby, this organization that I've joined up, has two goals. One goal is to train people like me, just like an ordinary person, to be able to feel comfortable talking about it and to talking about it to anybody. Our second in command in the whole organization was a kindergarten teacher. Right? So we come from all different, our CEO was an institutional, what do you call, motivator, motivational speaking. So we come from all over. So, pulling on the levers of political will. Citizens Climate Lobby has 538 chapters around the world and supports volunteers in educating the public with conferences like this, with monthly meetings, all sorts of online and real-time webinar trainings. Volunteers educate political, business, faith, and other leaders, and we do it by taking the position that anyone cares about this, if they just know the facts. Citizen Climate Lobby have monthly meetings, and we have talks in our monthly meetings from experts in economics, and political science, and communications, and business, and so on, to help us get good talking points. There are a number of organizations with information about, okay, so this is what we do. And the reason I put this here is because we talk to the community leaders, we'll talk to somebody like the Chase Bank. Instead of carrying the signs outside the bank, we send them emails, we say, can we come and talk to you? And we say, start off with thank you. Thank you for a safe place to put my money. Thank you for something. And then we go on and we explain why it's in their interest to make some changes. So there are some organizations that can help us make the case for banks and market investors to change to clean energy. And these organizations report on corporate social responsibility. So any corporation that is selling something to the public, whether it's selling a place to put your money or whether it's selling widgets, right? They want the public to like them. And the public now likes environment, and the concern about climate is growing, enough so that there's discussion in very high level corporations, and I would suspect the vast majority of them, about how can we make people think that we are good stewards of the environment, right? So what we say to them comes up and makes a difference. So this Bloomberg has just started a decarbonization tracker. I don't know that it's quite online yet, it's brand new. There's the Corporate Social Responsibility Hub, where you can go and look up, how is this corporation, how is that corporation doing? Datastream, Carbon Disclosure Project. There's an organization in California called CERES, C-E-R-E-S, which has yearly conferences. They've got, they charge $500 a seat, but they get all these corporations together talking about how can they be more sustainable. And these organizations are measuring their own carbon emissions. They're trying to reduce their carbon footprints. They're trying to show that they give to environmental charities. They're trying to change their corporate policies so it's beneficial to the environment and make socially and environmentally conscious investments. This is a new organization, the Renewable Energy Buyers Alliance. Now you would think that for a corporation like Amazon or Google, it would be really easy. They want to buy more clean energy, they go out and buy clean energy. Not so easy, because every state has different requirements for permits. You can't just put solar panels on your roof and say, because you want your suppliers to also be socially responsible, right? And so you've got the requirements from all the different states. You have all of the different forms that are generally used by lawyers when they write and negotiate contracts. And it's all different. So in order to help corporations be able to buy more clean energy, this organization was put together, Renewable Energy Buyers Alliance. And what they do is they support construction of new green power projects. They buy blocks of energy so they can underwrite construction of wind towers and solar farms and so on. And this was founded, this was put together by Google, Facebook, Salesforce, Disney, Walmart, Johnson & Johnson, with the help of the Rocky Mountain Institute, which is a Colorado institution that has been instrumental in getting lots of corporations greener and doing great research. So if you're at Rocky Mountain Institute, it's Amory Lovins. Hunter Lovins sort of split off from that and wrote a great book about sustainability. But we can't get complacent, because here's what else those corporations are doing, right? Google, Facebook, Disney, they supported REBA. But what else are they doing is they have new units, and they are charging the oil and gas, the fossil fuel companies, buckets of money to help them develop fossil fuels using the services of these tech firms, make it easier and cheaper and to streamline it. So give me a break. I mean, really, do one or the other? No, okay. So activists need to see the whole picture. And so one of the things that we will do when we talk to some of these people in these organizations is encourage them to talk to their higher-ups about not doing that. Google struck major deals with the oil field services company, Baker Hughes. It entered into talks to build a tech hub and data centers for Aramco, Saudi Arabia's massive oil company. So nobody's perfect, and the thing is that corporations are not born with a heart. We're born with hearts. They're not born with the hearts. They're born with the directions that they need to make money. And so that's not like insulting. Well, maybe it is. Okay, so lots of companies want to be seen as green, and this was a climate declaration that was signed by lots of, which says that we can't risk our children's futures, America has challenges, we can save money by using less electricity, driving a more efficient car, leading is what we've always done, and we will work together and help this be a coordinated effort towards a clean energy economy. So a lot of these companies have signed this declaration after conversations with some climate activists. And this doesn't solve it all, but it's a good step. It's a good step. Rocky Mountain Institute, there was a little article about how they're advising mining companies. You know, I thought mining, well, coal mining? No. It's mining for gold and bauxite and other things that we use, you know. So getting solar power to these remote areas in the underdeveloped world where there are mines is real helpful to the communities around them. And it's for things we need. So we also have to be careful not to stereotype companies and industries. Now, if there's one corporate entity that you would think would really get this climate thing, it's insurance. Wouldn't you think? You would think. You would think. So, $53 billion in 2018 is what the wildfires and hurricanes cost. Globally, $225 billion in 2018, 60% not covered by any insurance programs. Does anybody know, if you live on the seacoast, can you get private insurance to cover you? Probably not. So who's bailing out the people who have seaside homes? What I always
the government is. We are with our taxpayers' money.
Right.
We are.
I always wanted to see. When I got rich, I thought, I'm going to buy a home on the shore. It's going to be so wonderful. I'm going to have, you know, the ocean and the, oh, it's going to be fantastic. No, I don't want that anymore. So, the insurance is provided for people who live on the coast and who are threatened with flooding by the National Flood Insurance Program, right? So this has gone into increasing huge debt since the 2004 hurricanes, Katrina and Sandy. And people in flood-prone areas are supposed to pay premiums. They don't all pay premiums. There's a different thing about what money they can get back from the government depending on whether or not they do. But taxpayers pick up the bill and bail them out.
And then they rebuild.
And then they rebuild.
And then they say, well, you're going to bail me out again, so it's a great game.
It's something we need to change. With the cost of climate-related disasters soaring over the last 20 years, Munich Re, a reinsurance company, blamed global warming for $24 billion of losses in the California wildfires. And they divested their large thermal coal holdings, but they still hold gas and oil. The U.S. insurance companies are out of line with emerging global standards and keep investing in fossil fuels despite rising costs from fires. A group of citizens, were you with that group? A couple of citizens climate lobby people went down to talk to the insurance commissioner, Kreidler, and talked to him. He was one of 4 insurance commissioners in the country that about 3 years ago put out a document about how we've got to be sensitive to insurance. We've got to adjust our rates so we're taking into account climate-related disasters. And he told us, go talk to your insurance company. Find out if they're doing this, because most of them are not. So the government bails out not just insurance companies, they also bail out fossil fuel industries. Between 2015 and 2017, 120 oil and gas producers filed for bankruptcy protection in the U.S. And that's because fracking is not a very profitable industry. The wells go dry faster than they think. You know, this is new technology, and so there are all these all these companies going in and trying this. But the Sightline, which is a think tank in Seattle, did a research on this about the bankruptcy from oil companies that are drilling for natural gas. So, what does our government do? Enron, a company that does a lot of fracking, they were on their way to going bankrupt in 2016. They were down $1.1 billion. But they didn't go bankrupt because what happened? The 2017 tax revision gave them an extra $2.2 billion to play with, and they didn't have to go bankrupt. So subsidies from our federal government are a problem. And most people, when you say subsidies, I was just talking to the Nissan people here the other day. And, you know, I was explaining some of this to them. I like to talk to everybody. And I said, you know, there are a lot of subsidies for fossil fuels. And one of them said, well, yeah, but there's more for clean energy. No, there's many times more for fossil fuels. And I can show you the report of the Joint Commission in Congress that talks about how much the subsidies are for fossil fuels and justifies them. So bailouts, tax breaks, the government purchases, oh my goodness, huge amounts. So all government purchases, every fleet, you know, every new building should be climate friendly. And of course, the biggest subsidy is that climate change is not recognized. And so all the damages of climate change are not considered and not included in the cost of fossil fuels. So here's a list of just some of the laws that have given subsidies to the fossil fuel industry that we can find on the books fairly recently. There was an interesting IMF study that's 2015, and that came out. The Guardian reported that 5.2 trillion with a T is how much governments around the world give to their populations in sub-cost fossil fuels. They give away fossil fuel at below cost. Why would they do that? Because then people don't ask questions. People don't organize. They don't rally. They don't whine. They don't go to committee meetings. They don't form parties. They don't run for office. They just leave it alone. So, stranded assets. Okay, so this is another talking point that is useful to talk about. And what it means is that you get something that is not being able to be sold at what they thought they were going to sell it at, and they're holding the bag for something that is not financially viable. If I can sync my notes with those stranded assets.
It also doesn't reach its potential useful life. So, for example, if you expect a dam to exist for 20 years and it becomes obsolete in 10, it's a stranded asset. You can't sell it, but you also can't earn the income that you projected from it to justify the cost. So it's a stranded asset.
And what you'll see in the financial reports is you will see them saying that, well, if the government gets busy and starts to pass climate legislation, the carbon fee dividend, or like the cap and trade that didn't get through in 2009, when they pass that, then we're going to have to worry about stranded assets. But the truth of it is that with the cost of solar and wind going way, way, way down, they are already, I already talked about Enron? Yes. They're already losing money and going bankrupt because they can't compete. So, oil firms spend a lot of money on climate lobbying. Here is a tabulation, $201 million on lobbying in the last 1 year. So that's 1 year of lobbying. And what does the lobbying do? Yes, it keeps the candidates, keeps candidates and special interests. The oil firms spend millions on climate lobbying, but the figures show that they're getting back 10 times as much as they spend in terms of benefits. So they're getting it cheap. They're getting it cheap. General Electric, I don't think I said this, General Electric, recently, within the last year, last summer, they announced a $23 billion, a little tiny article. Who heard about it on the TV? They announced a $23 billion write-down, loss in value to their shareholders. And why? Because they had purchased a gas turbine company, if the gas turbine company wasn't making money and folded because of competition from solar and wind. So that's a couple different ways that assets can be stranded. Okay, so let's look at national defense. Let's look at military. And did anybody notice that they're about to pass another couple $100 billion to add to the defense budget? If you haven't looked that up, and off topic, sorry. Okay. The U.S. military is one of the largest oil-consuming institutions in the world. The U.S. has spent $32 million per hour or more since 2001. And a lot of that money, a lot of the military money, something like half of it, is going for equipment. It's going to build stuff that burns fossil fuels. So the ships and the vehicles and the aircraft that use this huge amount of oil, our military experts say that oil is a national vulnerability. The U.S. spends more on defense than the next seven countries combined do. And we can't look at how they're spending it. So, you know, generally it seems like about half of it is going to equipment. And you and I know that sometimes that equipment is requested by the Congress, but not by the military. Right? How does that happen? Because the Congress wants jobs in their district. So the spending on military and spending by the population as a whole is problematic. How are we doing here? Okay, so I want to go back. Okay, no, go on. So, U.S. population is spending more than its share on oil. And what we have on U.S. territory is 9% of the world's proven reserves of oil and natural gas. That figure has been stated for several years. I remember hearing Obama talk about that. We only have 9%. And you will hear people say that the U.S. can supply the world with oil. We're the biggest oil producers. Well, we are. We're producing a huge amount of oil, and we're exporting some. So does this make sense when we have to pay $300 billion a year to buy oil for our country? And if we don't buy that oil, we don't have enough for our military. We don't. So, you know, I've said to people, if I'm in a local civil war and I'm defending my house with a gun, I want the bullets right there. I don't want to go down to the next town for the oil that we need. So this is a national defense issue that what we could be doing is we could save U.S. oil, U.S. natural gas, only for our military and our aviation. And we could say everything else, all ground transportation, all buildings go zero. We could do that, and then we could probably supply our country with what we need, and we wouldn't have to be sending those billions and trillions over to the Middle East or Venezuela. So I suggest that to people, and you know, they're listening to me too.
Why is it that if we are the biggest exporters that we are still importing so much oil?
We're not. Yeah.
We are not the biggest exporters of oil. We are the biggest producers of oil right now, because federal policy of huge subsidies and encouragement of fossil fuel industry by the administration, and to a certain extent also by the previous administration, because there's a certain popularity to that, is that they wanted, when we said we need energy independence, they went, great, we'll drill more oil and gas.
Drill, baby, drill.
You gotta say what you mean. You know, what we meant was, we need less fossil fuels. We need more clean energy, but there weren't enough people saying that, apparently.
Didn't we just, in this last year, become a net exporter, though, of oil?
I thought I'd heard too.
I don't believe so, but I may be wrong, it's possible.
I mean, it was a real turning point, but I thought it happened just, okay, other people read that too, okay. All right.
I think it's natural gas and not oil.
Oh, it's a combination? Okay, liquefied petroleum.
So oil comes from Saudi Arabia, natural gas is coming from like North Dakota from other fracking wells. So.
That makes sense.
That would make sense.
Right, and the reason we're exporting natural gas, well, I could be wrong, I mean, I've tried to check it, but the reason we're exporting natural gas, anybody know? It's because of Russia. It's because of Russia. Because Russia exports natural gas and we want to compete with them. And also because they can turn it into LNG, liquefied natural gas. And here's the thing about natural gas. Natural gas, when you burn it, does not have a lot of soot, right? So they say it's clean. So my house used to burn coal, and you can see in the corners in the basement where it's still a little bit of coal there, like dirty stuff. But the natural gas burns cleaner, not as much soot. Okay, until 2007, the U.S. Supreme Court decision that said that climate change is got to be considered by the Environmental Protection Agency as to whether or not this is something that we need protection against. And so, as of that decision, the terminology for the word pollution changed. And when Obama came in, he implemented that Supreme Court decision, and he got the EPA to study, which they'd already done, so they immediately came out with their study, which said, duh, yes, of course, carbon dioxide and methane and greenhouse gases are a form of pollution. But on the books, there's still this natural gas is clean because they weren't considering what it does to overheat the atmosphere. When you burn natural gas, it emits enough carbon dioxide that it's about 60% as much carbon dioxide as when you burn for equivalent amount of energy for when you burn diesel or coal. That's rough. So they say, gee, you only get half as much. Well, it's more than that. But what is wrong with that? Who knows what's wrong with that? Leakage. Leakage. Have you ever had a helium balloon? You know, here's your balloon and it doesn't stay, the helium leaks out. Well, you try to keep natural gas, which is almost all methane, you try to keep that gas in a storage tank or in a pipe or in a bunch of rock, dirt under the ground, disturb it a little. So natural gas is leaking all over the place. And in the 1990s, the EPA looked at the question, gee, how much natural gas is leaking? We know it's methane, and we know that methane is worse for global warming than carbon dioxide. We didn't know exactly how much worse. That study came out a little bit later. But we're going to say maybe 1% of what we retrieve of natural gas is leaking. A couple years later, that was kind of questioned by some people at Cornell. They said, it looks to us like it's a lot more. And they said, okay, we'll change it. We'll say 2%. I mean, just sort of, what? Totally random. Well, the EPA has not since then done good objective studies on how much natural gas is leaking. There's a place, Tri Corners in Colorado, where the leakage rate is just regularly 9% from that whole complex. I talked to a scientist in LA who said he was measuring 15% from old pipes in LA. But generally, what most conservative estimates will say is, well, probably at least 3%. 3%, unfortunately, is the tipping point. Because if you crunch the numbers, and you say, okay, so natural gas is 60%, and so much of that, and you do all this number stuff, if the leakage rate is 3%, then retrieving, developing, and burning natural gas is just as bad for the climate as burning diesel or coal. If you take the extra energy that you need to compress it into liquefied natural gas, then it's worse. Definitely worse. So this is a problem. You got me off my topic. Sorry.
Yeah, we want-
Okay,
Yeah,
oil
that's
production.
important.
Okay, so this is another one of my favorite topics. Petrostates. Oh my goodness. Oh, there are reports on how people who study the indices of democracy in a country that is primarily dependent on one product. A petrostate. You go into Somalia, or you go into Mozambique, or you go to, and you say, hey guys, you have something really valuable, and we're going to dig up your oil, and we're going to dig up your natural gas, and we're going to pay you a bunch of money, and this is all going to be hunky-dory. What happens is that those countries become less democratic and less capitalistic. And the reason is, who gets the money? A couple of big leaders. They get rich, and they spend the money in the U.S., or they spend the money in going on junkets and in Switzerland, and the money doesn't stay in the country. And they have no incentive whatever to use that money to build up the small businesses that those countries need to become solid capitalist countries. So they become more militaristic and vulnerable, and it's not helpful to them. And here's this woman carrying wood, and what's that flame behind her?
Yes.
That's methane being flared off, right? And so, you know, they're not even, man. Okay, so, this is Seattle, right? The U.S. is not a petrostate. We have lots of other sources of income. But with the size and the power of the fossil fuel industry, exacerbated by the military need for fossil fuels, it can be argued that the extreme inequality of wealth and income in the United States is partly a result of our addiction to fossil fuels and their destructive influence on our political system. Wall Street bonuses of $27.5 billion last year was more than 3 times the annual combined earnings of all American workers employed at the federal minimum wage. So, for nearly 80% of people in the U.S., the value of wages has not increased since the 1970s. It's flat, it's stagnant. Inequality in our country is not good for anybody. And with a clean energy economy, we can re-stimulate the economy. We can spread it out. We can create more jobs that will be good-paying jobs with advancement and help our young people and our old people with a stronger economy. Can we afford a fossil fuel economy? Financial analysis by Mercer, which is a big investment firm, said that renewables are forecast to rise by 105%, as returns for coal will be down by 60% in a 2-degree scenario that we're likely to see by 2030. Examples of people doing it a better way. eBay saves $100,000 a year with energy efficiency and by putting up solar panels. The cost of solar, you see in this, is dropping precipitously, wonderfully. 22% per doubling of capacity. Here's the Vatican, and a little thing that says that's how much solar power, 4,000 terawatts of solar power are available. We're not using but a tiny bit of that. We're not using but a tiny bit of the geothermal capacity that we have on Earth. And we're not using but a tiny bit of the wind potential that we have available. So, clean energy, I don't know if you know this, is growing 30%, double digits and better. Wind has been growing for 26% per year. And coal, of course, is down. By 2016, 17 states received 10% or more of their in-state electricity from utility-scale renewables, and 3 states are getting 30% or more of their electricity from wind. And that was 2016, so I'm sure it's even better than that by now. And the biggest purchase of clean energy is international. it's Africa, and not so much Central America, Africa, Asia, huge purchases of clean energy, and of course, the United States, we're not capitalizing on that. It's coming from China and from other places. So, other ways to finance, personal, crowdfunding, buying bonds, putting up your own panels, getting city regulations. I think you could probably make a list of 40 different ways that you could help. And this is what we need the federal government to say that they're going to do. And I hate to put this up because just the opposite is happening right now. But we have to be ready, because look at the numbers of people turning out, and it's going to change. I know that. I'm old enough, I've seen it happen. The pendulum swings. It's going to go back, and we're going to take these standards and we are going to implement them on a national basis and on state basis. We are excited about the Green New Deal, the interest it's generating, and the enthusiasm for a clean energy economy. I choose to work with Citizens Climate Lobby because I started long before Clean New Deal came along, but also because, as I said this afternoon, if you get the investment incentives going, then the rest of the things that are called for in the Green New Deal have a fighting chance. Otherwise, clean energy can't compete. So, Citizens Climate Lobby proposal, you heard I said briefly this morning, Citizens Climate Lobby has proposed a revenue-neutral carbon fee and dividend, and it has now been introduced as a bill in Congress with bipartisan sponsors, and it calls for a fee on carbon fuels at the first point of entry, with all gradually increasing, with all the money being returned to households, and border tariffs so that countries that are making products, countries that don't have carbon fees, have to pay more, but there are more and more countries that are looking at carbon fees, so by the time ours is passed, that may not even be an issue. We're going to have 1,200 people in Washington, D.C. Oh, this is the Energy Innovation Act that I just described. Carbon fee, carbon dividends, border adjustment, and limited regulatory adjustment. That's a little complicated. So these are our co-sponsors for this legislation, and it doesn't show Denny Heck because he just signed on, but he's coming to our state meeting, which is the next hour, and anybody, whether you're a member of Citizen Climate Lobby or not, you're welcome to come and hear what he has to say about his support for the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. So this was a couple years ago. Here's me. We have, I don't know, 1,200 at least, maybe 1,500 people signed up this June. It's full. There might be a few more spots, but I don't think so. And we're real excited about that. We've got 28 people, I think, from Washington State, because we need representatives from every legislative district. So we have 10 legislative districts and a couple of people going, and they will talk to. So why go to D.C.? Why not just talk to your member of Congress here? The answer is that the people who really study this stuff and know it all are the kids. I'm sorry. So the young people here, I apologize. But it's the aides. It's the young aides that work for the members of Congress who really know the details of legislation and who know what's going on the Hill. And so we go back there to talk to them, and we send them the reports that we know about, and we talk to them and exchange information. And the sign of real success for us is when they call us up and they say, hey, we've got a bill, what do you think of this? And yes! I worked with a Republican, Dave Reichert, for a number of years, and we got to that stage in our relationship, and I felt like it was helpful. He was not good on all the issues that I wanted him to do something different on, but on climate, he was fabulous. He was fabulous. So maybe if he'd had people bugging him about everything else, I don't know. Talking points. There are talking points. If anyone wants to take a picture of that and write them down. Can we get these, can we get pictures of your slide deck? Can you email it, or? Let's talk about what parts of it you want.
Most of it.
Yes.
Oh, maybe you can collect emails.
What I want is there's a sign-up sheet. So take this and put your name on it and say, I would like, say, slide deck, please. Okay. Questions or comments? And let me hear what you have to say and think about this now. Yes.
I mean, obviously everyone here is on board with this, but there are a lot of people out there who still deny the existence of climate change. And not just deny, they deny it vehemently. I had an experience with one just a little while ago. She almost took my head off at the mere suggestion that climate change could exist.
Citizens' climate lobby is a misnomer. We are not all citizens, right? It's a big world and people move, and we have people who are maybe some sitting here who are not citizens of the U.S. Okay, 1. 2, we try not to say the word climate, especially when we're talking to conservatives. We talk about clean energy. Much more fun, much more acceptable. 3, we're not lobbyists like, we don't give them money. We don't hold receptions. We're citizens. We say what we think. We say what's from our heart and what we know, and that's the best we can do. Did that sort of answer it?
You approach them more by saying, well, if we develop clean energy, that will be cheaper than continuing with fossil fuel.
You could say that, or you could say, I just put solar panels on my son's house, and he's getting a fabulous return. And you'd be amazed how many people who deny climate change also want solar panels.
If I may put the man over there with the hat on the spot, he came up with a suggestion this morning about how to approach people with an opposite viewpoint. And I thought it was splendid. Could you please repeat it?
Oh, well, yeah, basically I call it the Detective Columbo approach, where I just basically say, help me understand where you're coming from. It's not that I pretend to be something other than I am, like I don't really know or have a pretty good clue, but it helps to build trust, and I genuinely am interested, because if there's something that they know that I don't, that could make me feel less anxious about this whole situation than I do, I would sure like to know that, because I like to be able to sleep a little better at night. And so that's the approach I take, and it seems to be fairly fruitful in letting people know, well, okay, I want to hear what they have to say, and then when they get to go first, then at some point, there's an opportunity for me to say, oh, well, yeah, I get what you're saying there, but how about this? How do you answer, how do you deal with that? What are you going to say to your kids when this stuff doesn't happen that you're thinking is going to happen, and save us all, or whatever? So,
I missed the figures on the cost of the natural extreme weather disasters that maybe we experienced just in the last year or so, and comparing that to the argument, or using that as an argument or a reason for moving towards a clean energy economy. So people say that it's going to cost us too much to make the transition. Well, so did you have those figures handy?
Oh, I can pull them out for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're from Canasta.
Yep.
Yes. Yes, we want to work with you. Yes. Question?
Oh, I just, going back to the other one, how to talk to conservatives, I missed the earlier part, but did you mention that on the CCL website there are a number of presentations by experts on how to talk to conservatives and climate deniers and about climate change?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
No, but thank you for mentioning
okay.
that. Right, right.
Yes.
Learning how to communicate is a major thing in CCL. And You can go to monthly meetings, go to the main website, go to Cloud or Resources, and go down and you'll find monthly meetings. And you can look through the speakers that we've had over the last 5-10 years. And here are all of the Yale School of Climate Communications and their webinars. And we also have, there are also action teams. So if you go to the site, if you're not already a member, you click on the red button that says join. They won't charge you. They will send you only one email a month. You'll get an email or a couple of them from the local chapter. And then you can look at the action teams. There's an action team on talking to conservatives. There are 35 action teams. So for every possible constituency, except not for finances. So I'm working on that. Yes?
Is there any way to find out, or do you know, when we talk about the amount of money that we spend from our domestic budget on offshore oil, how much of that never reaches the United States? That oil that's purchased, for instance, for military operations in a U.S. base in a foreign country, do we have any idea what that is?
That's an interesting question. But if you find it, I'd like to know.
You talked about the U.S. military consuming a lot of oil. What actions would have to be taken to change that?
Fellowship of Reconciliation, I know they were here at the conference. Physicians for Social Responsibility, which they're organizations that work on reducing our response, to make our response as a nation less dependent on military and more dependent on negotiation. And I think I would look for one of those organizations. In terms of what we do here, honestly, what I do is I use that topic because it's something that people who are quite conservative can understand. And I say I'm real concerned about the safety of our country, and I don't say to them I would like to see the military budget reduced. I say I'm really concerned about the safety of our country because we're sending so much money abroad to countries that don't like us to buy their oil. We only have 9% of the world's oil. And I worry about whether or not our military can continue to really protect us. So I want to see everything on the ground, buildings, ground transport, all electric, so the military has the oil it needs.
You want to reduce reliance on foreign oil, right?
Yeah, I talk about it in that way to people who are real conservative, but my bet is that there aren't a lot of people here who would really like to see the military budget grow, so I included some of that.
Yeah, but like assuming that the military budget would not go down and that we're still going to have them, so then the next step would be to get them to use more renewables. How, like, what avenues would be taken to make that happen?
You ever heard of the Great Green Fleet? So 5 years ago, there was a demonstration exercise in the South Pacific of an airplane lander. Yeah, and a bunch of airplanes, and they were all running on green fuel. They were all running on biofuels, and the military, for the first time under Obama, appointed a sustainability person to reduce the carbon emissions. And one of the first things they did, right at the tail end of the Iraq War, was they put solar panels on the roofs of these little huts, these little tents that the troops were sleeping in. And they kept them cool with solar panel electricity, and they reduced the number of tanks that they were driving that were just rolling bombs, and they reduced the deaths, just like that, by using solar panels. So, you know, that's the kind of information that we need to say to every person in the military and say, you know, what are you doing to reduce? The other issue with military, and I know that Bob Hallahan, who's a CCL member, just gave a talk on military, and I'm sure that he mentioned the fact that Norfolk is Seeking. There was another base right in the Midwest that they didn't even think was endangered, but had been flooded by rivers.
Nebraska.
I'm just keeping an eye on the time. 9 minutes till our state meeting starts.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
We can talk for hours.
Thank you.
Yeah.